Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name's Chris Meehan, and I'd like to welcome everyone today to BSI's webinar on achieving sustainability goals with BIM. I'm based in Australia today, and in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. I'm based in our Sydney office today, so I'm on the traditional land of the Woolloomooloo people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Everyone who's joined our webinar today has joined it in listen-only mode, but you're welcome to ask questions and we'll be monitoring the chat function as we go. And ideally at the end of this session, what we'll be doing is answering as many of those questions as we can. So if your question is not answered during the webinar, we'll be following up with everyone who puts questions in the chat and getting some opinions from our experts and making sure that we can answer as much of that as we can. We're going to be having a couple of polls today, and I'd encourage you all to be as actively involved in those polls as you can be. I've already introduced myself very briefly, but what I'd like to do is actually introduce two of our experts who are joining us today from BSI. So firstly, I'd like to introduce my colleague Jonathan, who's our Sector Director for Built Environment for BSI APAC and is based in Manila in the Philippines. Jonathan's a senior global executive with over 15 years of leadership experience driving sales, marketing, operations and digital transformation within the water, building materials and construction industries. With innovation and digitalization at the forefront, he's been driving strategies and transformations of large organizations with an end-to-end customer-centric approach on a global scale. Using his strong industry knowledge and a powerful vision for change, he's now providing businesses with an ecosystem of innovative solutions for a more digitally enabled, safe, and sustainable built environment. And joining us at a very early time from London, so thank you, Rahul, is Rahul Shah, our Sector Director for Built Environment for our EMEA operations. Rahul has a diversity of experience spanning over 24 years working with asset owners, contractors, architects, engineers, manufacturers and national standards bodies. He's previously worked at organisations including Woods Bagot, Lendlease and Multiplex, and he's led various digital innovation initiatives at organisational level. In his current role at BSI, he's passionate about supporting clients in driving purpose-led outcomes and sustaining continual improvements in tackling global challenges such as climate change, rapid urbanisation, resilient supply chains, and digital transformation using global best practices. So Rahul and Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here.
Before we do kick off and we hear from our expert speakers, what we'd like to do is just gauge the experience from our audience here. So we're just about to launch a poll within our system, and we'll be asking as a first poll is your organization already using BIM? And we'll be asking you to select one of those answers. Have you never heard of it? Do you know about it, but have not started using it yet? Are you in the process of implementing, but could use improvement? Do you already have a mature BIM program? Or if none of those applies, you can answer within our chat function. So I'll give about 10 seconds or so for everyone to be able to put their feedback into that. And I believe we may have closed the poll now. So we've got a variety of answers there. The leader being at 54%, we're in the process of implementing but could use improvement. Then a joint between we know about it but have not started using it, or we have a mature BIM program. And finally, we've never heard of it and other at just 8%. So Rahul, maybe I'll ask you for your opinion on any of that data and whether that's anything that seems similar to many of the conversations you're having around the world at the moment.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for having me, first of all, and hello, everyone. No, it's an interesting feedback here. What's intriguing to me, what's in the other 8%? But I think majority of it, it's a really good spread for us, you know, that majority of the people are here because they've heard of it or maybe just vaguely heard of it but never used it. So it's really great to have audience with some good mix. We also have 15% there, who believe they have mature BIM programs. So it would be great to also learn from them as well during Q&A and the interactivity as well. But no, good to see a really good mix here.
Thank you, Rahul. And Jonathan, I'll ask you the same question. Anything that springs out to you from the data
Yeah,
that you can see?
likewise, Chris. I think it's good that we have a very good balance, very good mix of different maturity, which is no surprise. But I'm actually a bit surprised to see that 15%, which is a significant percentage, have a mature BIM program, which is really great to hear. And I do hope that also those people will get value out of the webinar today. So yeah, good to see that. Thanks for participating.
Thank you both. And now we'll be asking you to participate in a second poll as well, which should be coming up on your screen in a second. And this one's about, when you think of BIM, what first comes to mind for you? Is it 3D modeling, software products, information management, standards and collaborative processes, or again, other? And again, I'd encourage you, if it is other, please put the answer in the chat so we can have a look at that and come back with any questions or any feedback that you've got there. So we should have just launched the poll now. So again, I'll give about 10 seconds or so for answers to come in. And if we can close the poll, please. And there you go. So 3 main answers springing out there in terms of information management at 56%, standards and collaborative processes at 33%, and 3D modeling at 11%. So Rahul, I'd like to hand back to you then, please. And what's your interpretation of this?
Chris, this is really, really encouraging to see the trends. And I've been having these, BIM conversations for, over many years now. And it's great to see that the mindsets are shifting from 3D modeling and software products to it's more about information management. It's more about collaborative processes. So it's really, really great to see that majority of our audience are in that right mindsets, and that BIM is about that information management and standards and collaborative processes. So really great to see.
Excellent.
And Jonathan, same question to you, please.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rahul. It's very encouraging to see that really we shift the mindset to a really collaborative process, because BIM, you will see, and you probably know, is all about collaboration. And I'm very happy to see that there is no answer for software products, because of course, at the end of the day, BIM is so much more than a software. So yeah, very encouraging results, Chris.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. And I'll hand over to you to start our presentation for today, please.
All right. So once again, hi, everybody. And today's topic is achieving sustainability goals with BIM. So if we reflect on the last question, BIM is different things, and sustainability is different things. So what exactly is the scope of the discussion today? If we talk about sustainability, or if we talk just about BIM, frankly, we can be here all day and still not cover both subjects completely. So first, I will try to cover what we are going to talk about when we talk about sustainability. Then Rahul will give you a bit of an overview of what we are talking about for BIM. And then we will go into the overlap between both subjects, which is really interesting. And finally, we will look at how standards can help you also to achieve your sustainability goals with BIM. So sustainability. So there are a lot of things that we can talk about when it comes to this topic. Front of mind, you may think about greenhouse gas emissions, some sort of equity, biodiversity, water and waste management, things of that sort. So for the purpose of today's discussion, we have narrowed it down to a few key categories. So one of the biggest one we would like to talk about today is carbon management. So, as you may know, buildings are currently responsible for 39% of global energy-related carbon emissions. So if you look at the graph in the built environment, if you try really to oversimplify things, there are essentially two main sources of carbon emissions in the life cycle of a building. So the first one that you can see on the left is when a building is being built, constructed. So you are gathering raw materials, you are making products, you are transporting all that stuff into the site. So you are building the building itself. All of that has an embodied carbon or an embodied emission to it, and that is roughly or historically speaking about 50% of the carbon emission of the life cycle of a building. Then you have the other one on the right, which is pretty much what we've been focusing on over the past 20, 25 years. That's typically what people are more familiar with, which is what we call the operational carbon emission. So that is typically associated with energy usage, water usage. Everybody knows about, for example, retrofitting of lighting, water reduction initiatives. All of that come down to operational emission in a building. So now, next, Chris, please. When we are talking about sources of carbon, so my main message here is that it hits throughout the entire life cycle of a building. So this is not just happening at the construction phase. This is not just happening at the operational phase. There are portions of carbons that happen throughout the entire life cycle. So you start from the time that you manufacture the product down to the end of life of a building, and even beyond the life cycle of a building. So we can use BIM to manage all those different aspects of the life cycle process in order to improve and to increase the sustainability of a particular building during its life cycle. So that's what we are going to cover a bit later in the presentation. But I just wanted to introduce this concept to you, because that's a graph that you will you will see a couple of times in the presentations today. This is from British Standards 15978, that is authored by BSI, and this graphic is from New Building Institute. Next. So that is the life cycle of a building, but inevitably, everybody that is talking about carbon emission in the built environment is also starting to look at the different scopes of those emissions. And I'm sure that pretty much everybody in the call have heard about scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So what you can see in the slide, that's a high-level overview that is coming from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the framework that is used by approximately 85% of the organizations out there for monitoring and tracking their greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll go one by one. As you can see, so scope 1 emissions, they are things that are generated from the building themselves. So any company vehicle, any generator that are on site, things like that. So emissions that are directly from that particular facility. For the scope 2, and that's normally what most people are familiar with. This is your purchased electricity, you purchase coolings and heating, you purchase natural gas. So things that you buy, so you are responsible for the emission, but they are not generated directly from the site. And the scope 3, there are pretty much anything and everything else. So all the emissions that are emitted through the value chain, both downstream and upstream. So all the things that you purchase, anything that you throw away at the end, any emission that your products cause once you sell them, all of that falls under scope 3. So don't worry, we are not going to dive into all of this, but this is just helpful to understand that when we are talking about emissions in a particular building, they are more than just how much energy your building is consuming. Next slide. So now we will have a look at net zero, which is another word very trendy that everybody is talking about. More specifically, the road towards net zero, the journey, because we are still a very long way to reach this destination. So I would like to share my view on the current situation and really looking at the future. If I start with the past, in the past 10, 15 years, when we talked about sustainability, we were more looking at operational performance and environmental design, which is, if you remember, we started to hear about the first green buildings. So nowadays, we are really going through a transformation. We have BIM, we have digitalization, we have smart and sustainable that are coming together for, at the end of the day, a resilient design. And in the next 10 years, in the future, so I've got a strong feeling that net zero carbon buildings, they are going to become a new trend or even a benchmark. So what is the net zero building, carbon building? It's, you remember the definition of embodied carbon plus operational carbon. The sum of both is equal to zero. So it's being neutralized. And for this, of course, zero embodied emissions needs to be considered because it is so much more difficult to track and to measure embodied carbon compared to operational carbon, obviously, where you can see, all the consumption into your electricity or into your water bill. So you have also AI and deeper digitalization really at the heart of the ecosystem. You will have distributive renewable energy, like solar panel, for example, on the roof, and the grids. So for example, if you have an EV car, if you park your EV car into a parking, and then that you can link your EV car into the grid, then you can contribute back the electricity into the grid, which is what we are calling V2G. So yeah, that was a quick overview really on what we are going to discuss today, really to scope the discussion, where you've seen embodied carbon, operational carbon, then you have scope 1, 2, and 3, and then you have also the net zero concept, which is really what we are going to focus on through this discussion. On that note, I will turn it over to Rahul, that will give us an overview on what BIM is, and then we will talk about, again, the overlap between both topics. Rahul, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for giving such an excellent overview of sustainability and what, the context of today's webinar is. So what is BIM? And I guess I will be repeating myself here because, when I saw, the second poll, which was really encouraging, I think majority of on the call, it is about the whole life cycle of the built assets, whether it's infrastructure project or buildings, vertical buildings. It's about managing information throughout the whole life cycle of the built asset in a collaborative way, right? So that is at a very fundamental level is what BIM is. But if you look at the next slide, what BIM defines, and it was also very encouraging to see that there was no one on the call thought that BIM is about software products. It is absolutely not about software product. It is about information management processes. So if we look at the next slide, please, the BIM is about defining a set of processes to not only produce information throughout the design, procurement, construction, and operation phases, but it's also about how do you exchange information? How do you manage information throughout the asset life cycle, right? So it covers the entire whole life cycle approach in terms of defining the process. Next, please. And why do we need BIM? We've been buildings and doing constructions for many years, right? And if we look at some of the research reports and evidences around the world, and I have picked up one of the reports that I think is really relevant in this context of this webinar today. Why we need to talk about BIM and why now? And if we look at this, report from World Economic Forum, it's slightly old. I think it was published back in 2016, but it's still very relevant. Where some of the world's leaders and the thinkers came together to agree an action plan. It's not about a theory. It's not about a concept or a hypothesis anymore, right? The time is now to actually action on implementing BIM. And if we look at some of the key drivers, the top 3 drivers that I have picked out from the report, reduction in construction and whole life cycle cost. But what's most important, and Jonathan already touched upon sustainability and scope 1, 2, and 3, sort of emissions and carbons. And I think that's number 1 priority for us as a sector, because we are one of the biggest contributors to this carbon challenge that we are facing out globally, right? So substantially reduction of environmental impact. How can we do that using these collaborative processes in BIM? And third, but not the last one, it's about how can we respond to ever increasing, exponentially increasing urbanizations around the world using the technologies and processes around BIM, because we got finite resources, not only in terms of the natural resources, but also labor, and people. So how can we use processes and technologies in a better way to actually improve productivity? So these are the top 3 sort of, key ambitions from clients and asset owners, from this report. If we go to the next slide, please. And we can see, for example, I've taken this example from, what we see in Australia, for example, and the guidelines, have emerged in the last few years. The Victorian Digital Asset Strategy, the one from Queensland, and that there is another one from New South Wales, department as well. And we can see that there is increasing, and not just Australia, but around the world, many governments and departments have started sort of, guidelines, mandates in some countries to actually support the industry in terms of adopting BIM. Because it is time now to take action in terms of improving the way we work in construction. And why do we need to think about that? Go to the next one, please. We can see that in and this is another one of my favorite research, international research about the problems that we are facing in construction. And I'm sure most of you would have come across many other types of research as well that suggests that productivity is a #1 challenge in our industry, partly because of fragmentations and the way we work, the contractual frameworks and so forth. But if we look at these numbers on the slide, on the left-hand side where you see 35%, that's quite a staggering, shocking number, that 35% of the construction professionals spend time on non-productive activities on construction sites. Now, if you just pause on that just number there, I mean, it's a quite staggering number. If you think about the construction as an industry, it's a very high risk, low margin industry. We cannot afford to spend 35% of our time on non-productive activities. And if we look at the next slide, we can see some of the top reasons why people are spending this time on non-productive activities. And then the top 3 reasons, as you can see on the screen, #1, it's about poor communications. How can we improve communication? Because the supply chains and the whole activities are so fragmented. I think communication is #1. We need to get it right. Again, about lack of responsiveness of data and information delivery. Again, that's the second most sort of the biggest reasons why people spend time in terms of searching for informations. There is no confidence in accuracy of the available data or information. So how can we leverage the global good practice around managing information in a better way, call it BIM, and using some of the international frameworks? So if we look at the next slide, please, the good news is that we already got guidelines available. We already got, standards and other things available as well. But before I go to the next, the guidelines, I think this is also very important to just remind everyone that because of the productivity challenge and other challenges associated with productivity and efficiencies. This is another international research report conducted as well, that outlines that the cost to the industry is staggering in trillions of dollars, US dollars, right? And I think the indirect cost would be even further as well. So we can see that the challenge that the industry is facing in terms of productivity and cost are quite shocking at the moment for us. Go to the next one, please. So the good news is that we got international good practices around how can we improve our information management using BIM technologies, processes, as well as associated collaborative working practices. So most of you would have heard, because again, I keep referring to the poll and your answers. To you, BIM is about standards and collaborative working. And it is really well captured in ISO 19650 standards, and it's in 5 parts at the moment, and the 6th one is being developed as we speak. And we've got really good framework there in terms of improving information management, right from design all the way through to construction into operations, and how to also embed a security minded approach into implementing BIM. Next one, please. And what you would also see is that, I referenced to some of the guidelines from Australia, and if you read, some of those guidelines, they also refer to this international good practices, ISO 19650 as well. So I think there is a clear alignment globally as well as locally, national level as well, that these good practices are proving very beneficial. But what's driving those benefits? What's helping you to realize those benefits? And as you can see on the slide, it's mostly about people. There's no good to buying standards or technologies. It's only as good as people using them, whether it's standards, whether it's people. So I think people are at the heart of BIM implementations and BIM success. It's about identifying, what are the skill sets required, per job functions, whether it's project manager, project engineer, design managers, quality managers, procurement teams, and etc. What are the skill sets that they require to actually use BIM during that, job functions? Because we don't want to see BIM in silo, as a separate functions when you go on construction sites or operations. It should be integrated part of all job functions. Of course, you also need technologies to drive BIM collaborative processes, the common data environments, the softwares and so forth as well. But I think what links people and technology is about having the right processes, so that once you establish some baseline processes using international good practices such as ISO 19650, it allows you to scale that good practice within your organizations and within your supply chain as well. It allows you to automate certain things. I mean, Jonathan mentioned AI, machine learning, and all those things, right? Once you get the fundamental processes established, then you can think about scaling it up and sort of automating as well. Go to the next one, please. And once this is also, I thought I highlight some of the benefits that the organizations are realizing around the world by implementing BIM properly. And the first and foremost, very low hanging fruit is always about improving productivity. Can you do things faster? Whether it's, design schedules, design drawings, or in construction, you go to construction processes. But also ultimately where we want to be is in the middle. It's about improving sustainability. How can we, improve circularity. Once we have the record of all the building materials and the building processes and everything during the operations phase, can we use that intelligent data as part of that whole circularity concept as well, and enabling built environment to be more circular because we got the right data, right, as well. So I think the low hanging fruit in my experience also implementing, I've seen when you are pitching to your leadership teams, it's always about, can we do be more productive, can we be more efficient, and so that's a good starting point always. But keep in mind the long-term vision. It's also it's about improving sustainability footprint of your own business, your projects, your assets. And I think BIM has plenty of things to offer, right from productivity gains all the way through to reducing rework, designing out waste, and overall improving your business resilience as well. Go to the next one, please. So as Jonathan mentioned, that we would be referring to a couple of slides again as a visual clue, that today is not about just telling you what is BIM or what is sustainability. Today is mostly about, we want to spend time on how BIM can support some of the sustainability goals. And Jonathan and I would like to sort of unpack that in the next 20 minutes or so, because we also want to give you some time for Q&A, and we would welcome interactivity and some questions as well. So we would go into this, and before we go into this, we have the third poll coming up now. So if we can launch the third poll, that would be great. Thank you. So yeah, now after having heard Jonathan and I about what is sustainability and what is BIM, we would really appreciate your thoughts on where do you think that BIM can make the most impact during the asset life cycle. Is it during the product manufacturing? Is it during design construction? Or is it during operations, end of life? Or do you think there is somewhere else that we missed? So I'll give you 10 seconds or so, and then we will close the poll and see the results. Thank you for your patience with this. We should be closing the poll soon now and be able to see the results. Fantastic. That's a really good sort of spread there as well. Really interesting to see that people don't think that there are gains to be made during products manufacturing, but really good to see a really good spread, and very encouraging to see that the operations life cycle, operations and maintenance is the highest, people believe, where we can make the difference. Jonathan, at this point, I'd like to invite you as well and your thoughts on these interesting results.
Thank you, Rahul. I think it's very interesting because, normally what we get as results is most people are using BIM for design and construction. So it's really encouraging once again to see that, we are looking at operations and maintenance. So that's really the next phase of development also for us, for BIM. So really, really encouraging. And if you think about it, design and construction, that's 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, if that's a big project. But then the next 50 years are in operations and maintenance. So even though maybe most of the benefits of using BIM can be seen, or the impact can be seen at design phase throughout the life cycle, then of course the potential that is pretty much untapped, it's really in operation. So once again, great to see that, very encouraging.
Thank you, Jonathan, and over to you to take us forward. Yeah. Jonathan.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, we are making good use of this graph, and as Rahul mentioned, what we want to do is not only to break down the different life cycle stages and show you how BIM can improve your sustainability programs, but also give you a bit of an overview on the sustainability goals areas. So for the purpose of today's webinar, we have narrowed them down to 4 categories. The first one is energy. Then we have water, we have waste, and we have quality, which is pretty much efficiency, improvement of processes, speed, things of that sort. So yeah, let's start with the first one on product manufacturing. If you go to the, yeah, thank you. So there was a 0% response in the chat, which is pretty much correlated to the fact that we don't have much research, we don't have much facts when it comes to to the benefits on products manufacturing, but they're pretty obvious, and there are frankly quite a lot of those benefits. What I have done on the slides, I have color coding the different categories. But if you have any trouble seeing colors, don't worry, that we will send after the presentation. After the webinar, we will send the presentation where it's going to be labeled. So benefits, the first one that we can see in this category are in the energy category. Because if you think about it, just the reduction of process-related energy, that is such a huge benefit when it comes to BIM. So BIM enables this by really giving you a more precise estimation of what is going to be used. So you don't need, excess in terms of ordering. And then, your supplier is not using energy to make these products. So it's a down the chain impact. As simple as this, of course, we are saving emissions in there. In addition, information modeling can increase the use of low carbon materials, especially when you look at really analyzing those data, where you can see, especially in structural, non-structural elements, for example, where you can use a low carbon kind of concrete in a building. And logically, the higher quality materials will last longer. So at the end of the day, you do not need to reorder those materials that often. And of course, this is creating a decrease in emissions. So what we can see, it's pretty much the same and very similar in the water category, where you have process relating water. I use the word optimization here, not reduction, on purpose, because it's really depending on what product you are making. And of course, if you make less product, then therefore you are using less water. Last, on the waste category, so if you really can precisely, scope out the amount of material that you need, once again, you order exactly what you need. So from a product perspective, your supplier will produce what you need. So you do not need, the usual 10% buffer that you typically ship on the job site. So there is a huge benefit here in terms of waste. So there are certainly more. Once again, we welcome any idea on the chat if you think we have missed something huge, or if you just want to add anything. And now we are going to move to sorry, Rahul, any thought on this?
Thanks, Jonathan. And you know what? The last poll, that was a bit of a surprise for me. I've never seen that people think that there are 0% of that benefits during product manufacturing, because as you rightly said, Jonathan, there are many more as well. I'm sure not just these 5, but having worked myself with main contractor, as Chris mentioned in my introductions, I have seen great benefits of BIM during product manufacturing. If you look at cladding manufacturing, the facades panels, for example, and how can we optimize facades panels, using BIM processes, and reduce waste. Facade rationalizations and optimizations is one of the biggest sort of topic. If for those of you who are from architectural background on the call would appreciate this, that having different facades, look at any typical buildings, and if we have different types of facade panels, on a building, that could cost more, but also cause more waste. And so how can you optimize and rationalize facades? This is just one example. To your point, Jonathan, that you mentioned the reducing waste and access. So thank you for taking us through, and I'm sure our audience would have learned from this as well, that there are many benefits for product manufacturing. Absolutely. Thank you. If we can move to the next one, then what we would like to see is, and I know 43% of you already said that there are great benefits during design and constructions already, and you can see already that the reason why I had to restrict myself to this 12 or however many points is because I'm running out of space on this slide, because there are clearly many benefits during design, in terms of optimizations, whether it's HVAC, cladding systems, or room sizes, or floor spaces, all the way through to waste as well. Reducing waste starts with designing out waste. Can we design out waste right from design stage, and then make sure that that thinking and efforts continue into construction as well, where we continue and design out waste, right? I mean, there are many benefits you can see in terms of optimizations, waste reductions, but also in terms of, you may have heard about, just-in-time deliveries as well. That can it also support in terms of material deliveries on site as we progress the construction, for example, as well. Now, of course, logistically, it may not be always possible to have just-in-time delivery, but sort of, because I think material storage is also one of the biggest challenges on construction sites as well. So using BIM, can we plan things ahead and proactively manage construction sites as well, for example, right? As Jonathan already mentioned, can we also reduce the need for over-specifying structural components? Because sometimes, there are tolerances that, sometimes people add thinking, oh, just to be on the, but using BIM, you can simulate, your designs, you can simulate the thermal analysis, your solar analysis, your, structural analysis, so we can also improve there as well. During constructions, I mean, there are plenty of advantages. A couple of them, I'd like to lift out, would be, say, on construction sites, giving access to the right information at the right time to right people is a challenge, as we already saw during the productivity, the research report. And can we sort of have that common data environment and information available, the right revisions, the right, drawings or schedules and etc. to the workers on site through the common data environment and collaborative processes, right? Can we also, because we are able to make information available, right information available at the right time to right people, there are, benefits that we can have in terms of construction rework reduction. We can reduce construction rework. We can also reduce defects and snags and quality issues. We can get things right first time. So all of these you can sort of realize by implementing BIM properly, not only during design, but also all the way into construction as well. And if we move on to the next one, 48, I think it was 48% of you said that there are great benefits during operations and maintenance as well. And absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you as well. So if we move on to the next slide, please. There are plenty of benefits. Oops, not last one, before, please. I mean, there are plenty of benefits. Oops, sorry. If we go to the operations and maintenance, please. Yeah, that would be better. Thank you. You can see that there are sort of benefits in terms of, whether it's energy, efficiencies or water efficiencies, as well as quality of the operations, the maintenance and etc. And by doing this also, we can obviously sort of design out certain waste and efforts as well during operation as well. So there are plenty of benefits of having the right information about the building components, the maintenance regimes, as well as spare parts, and the product sort of life information, warranty information, and et cetera, right? I mean, we all know that what happens in terms of the traditional building operations, and when you go, there is a basement somewhere with a pile of files and the drawings and the documents and what have you. And the idea here is that can we move away from that and have the digital record using asset information model. Once we complete the construction, move into asset, and through CAFM systems and collaborative working, can we utilize that BIM information that we generated using design and construction into operation to actually improve productivity and efficiencies, but also improve water efficiencies as well as energy efficiencies as well. Next, please. And yeah, with this one, Jonathan, I'd like to invite you to this one, please, and share your thoughts. And also, Jonathan, while you're here, it would be great to hear your thoughts also on design, construction, and operations as well. If there is anything, Jonathan, that you would like to add that I may have missed.
Yeah, you covered it pretty well, Rahul. I'm conscious of time. Just one thing that I highlighted is, I like what you said about having the right first-time mindset. It was not rare historically to look at a building that is designed 2.5 times and that is built 1.5 times. So really having this change of mindset, having really the right first-time approach, being correct is extremely important. So thanks for this reminder, Rahul. And yeah, I will move to the end of life of a building, or what we call circularity. So when we look at the end of life for any building, we have actually quite a lot of options. I like to start with a quote, which is, as you know, the most sustainable building is the one that is never built. But the next one, the next most sustainable is the one that you can reuse for a different purpose. So typically speaking, what you can do here is you knock it down and then you start fresh. So you rebuild it. However, when you really start, using data-driven decision making, you can help the end of life of, a building by really incorporating those changes from the beginning. So that is what we call front loading or design for deconstruction. So we are using materials and design from the start that can be reused. One more thing that I like to point out is, you always have a challenge when it comes to the end of the life of a building, and you want to reuse it for a different purpose, but you don't really know what's going on with this building. You don't really know. There is a bit of hesitations because you don't know what happened inside this initial building. So just being able to spec out in a digital twin or a digital model that can really encourage building reuse rather than really a complete knockdown. So yeah, of course, any modeling of that building can encourage reuse. Is good for sustainability. Of course, it decreases energy and fuel consumption as well. That is logical. And when you're looking really at reusability of materials, then you can have, again, more precision is what you can reuse and what you cannot reuse. So that will help you to build a stronger, a better waste management plan, which at the end of the day is a fundamental aspect of a strong sustainability program. Rahul, any thought of this before we move on?
No, I think you covered it beautifully, Jonathan. I just want to highlight the third bullet point, green, and what BIM allows is about designing and constructing for deconstruction. As you rightly said, it's about reusing the materials. It's about reusing the building materials, right? And BIM absolutely allows you to do that design first of all with deconstruction in mind or with reuse in mind. Right, so absolutely great points, Jonathan, there.
Thank you, Rahul. We can move to the next slide, please. So to end our presentations, now we will look at something very important, so why we should care about standards and certifications. So first of all, well, they can bring us a lot of value, but first, really, they are, the standards, they are a summary of best practices of organization worldwide. So really, standards and certification will give you, guidance in implementation. Then credibility can be improved, because I think now there is a lot of you, when it comes to sustainability, you probably heard about, what we call greenwashing, especially now that we are promoting net zero and sustainability. Every company is claiming that they are green to some extent. So third-party verification are extremely important in this case, and again, certification against a particular standard can give you this credibility. Our governments, as you know, have certain mandates for companies to comply. So that's very important to to join BID, also to comply with those government requirements, policies, laws, etc. Your customers, so your customers, they have most of them commitments to net zero, and also they have commitments towards their suppliers. So it's very important that you have the certification when it comes to your clients. And same point for investors that are publicly listed. So they are looking for ESG performance. Of course, that is something that they are doing, to prevent or to avoid having risk in their investment. And finally, you have the market access. As you know, if you want to export your goods, your products, for example, to the EU, then obviously you need to fulfill certain standards. And I will move to the conclusion of our presentation. Next one, please. All right. So what you can see here, there are really two priorities for the built environment. The number one really is digitalization. This is clear, and the other one is decarbonization. So what you can see on this graph, so it provides sort of directions for practical approaches. We are utilizing a digitized intelligence framework. So what we're trying to do is to derive a sustainable management. That's what you can see on the right-hand side from the step 1 to 3. So we derive this from carbon management strategies. And thereby, we are facilitating the journey towards carbon neutrality and net zero targets at the end of the journey. But most importantly, at the bottom, what you can see is really the foundation. So we have BIM and the 9650 series of standards that was presented by Rahul. This is really the smart layout that that can provide the digital technology and the technical support if you want really to achieve your sustainable management steps, and then eventually your net zero goals. So basically, this is a framework on how digitalization and sustainability can work together. And behind this framework, what you can see are the standards that really can provide support and once again achieve your sustainability goals with BIM. Thank you. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Rahul, for all of those insights. That's been an excellent session. That's been very informative for me. We are going to take a few questions in a second, and what I'll be doing is I'll be asking you those. Before we do that, we're going to have a very simple poll. And the simple poll is, based on what you've heard today, would you like BSI to contact you for further discussion? It's very simple. Tick yes, and we'll contact you, and tick no, and we'll just follow up with the webinar and things afterwards. While people are completing that, though, Rahul, one of the things that I'd like to ask you as a direct question is, if you go back to your previous career when you're working on the other side, have there been ever any particular projects that you've been involved in where BIM's played a crucial role in achieving sustainability goals, and any key takeaways from that?
Oh, which one should I choose? Because as I said, almost all projects directly or indirectly supports us in achieving sustainability. But the one that I'd like to lift out would be a scheme called Rathbone Square in London when I was at Lendlease. And that was a scheme in London, heart of London, and with a developer called Great Portland Estates, where the client was very well educated about the benefits of BIM, and all credit to the client providing that great leadership in terms of right from day one of the design, articulating really well, what they want in terms of BIM, why they want BIM, and actually providing their leadership all the way throughout design, constructions, and taking that information into operations as well. And couple of examples that I'd like to lift out from that particular project, where we had almost all supply chain members. I mean, we had, in terms of just, talk about the technology part, we had all, like, the M&E contractors, the cladding contractors, the fire and, sprinkler contractors, and structure contractors, and block work contractors, and many, many subcontractors, all using BIM as part of their, shop floor drawing productions, coordinations, and installations on site as well. And that helped massively. Now, due to sensitivity around the commercials and numbers, I won't be able to give numbers, but I know from experience, and that project achieved massive gains in terms of savings in rework, in terms of how they were able to reduce rework on construction sites, how they were able to sort of rationalize, the facades, the components, and the hatchback ducts, and so forth as well. So to me, I think the biggest gains were around M&E, sort of whole installations, the cladding, as well as the block work, in terms of reduction in rework, but also optimizations in terms of size, in terms of installations, and so forth. So improving productivity efficiencies, but also reducing rework, which all then contributed to sustainability goals in terms of the ones that are outlined by Jonathan during designing constructions. And as I said, I was not involved in operations, but I know that during the handover of the project, we were able to hand over the asset information to go into the asset information model for the client, for them to use.
Perfect. Thanks, Rahul. Jonathan, a question that's come through from the chat as well that I'm going to direct to you is, do you have any examples on what the best way is to measure or calculate your waste reduction, or any other achievements that you're getting from BIM, for example, through a construction project or something like that?
Well, BIM, BIM will not, directly give you, a methodology to measure, track your carbon emission for example, for waste. But I think, as we discussed earlier, as you could see, if you remember the pyramid, BIM is really the foundation, for collaboration, and really, for data exchange that will, at the end of the day, really help you to get, the right set of data that eventually, of course, will help you to direct those efforts into really calculating precisely, those sort of emissions.
Thanks, Jonathan. A very technical one here, Rahul, which I'm going to put you on the spot with. Do you know what the title is of the proposed ISO 19650 Part 6? And if you don't, I'm sure we can follow up afterwards.
No, I don't, but it is to do with health and safety and how to use BIM for health and safety, which is following up from PAS 1192 Part 6, which is current. So if you are interested in knowing the direction of ISO 19650 Part 6, I would recommend you to have a look at the PAS 1192 Part 6. And that is the direction of ISO 19650 Part 6, which is to do with health and safety in BIM. But I don't know the exact title.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you, Rahul, and thank you, Jonathan, for your input today. We're running very short on time, so what we're going to do is going to end the webinar there. So I'd like to thank both of you for your input today. I'd like to thank Alexa, who's been working on the background, controlling all of our slides and making sure that everything goes according to plan. And I'd like to thank all of our registrants as well for who've attended and anyone who's watching this afterwards. The idea is this to be a first part in a series of BIM-related and sustainability-related webinars. We've already got another one lined up, which is on the future of digital transformation, innovation and applications for the built environment industry. So you'll be hearing more about that as we launch that, I believe, next month. So please keep an eye out for the invitation. Thank you once again, and look forward to seeing you on our future webinars. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.